This is Olivia Green interviewing Dr. Melva Newsom for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is currently 3:11 p.m. on May 7th, 2025, and this interview is being recorded at Dr. Newsom's home in Wilberforce, Ohio. Thank you so much again for making some time to sit down with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So before we get into all of the questions, can you just state your full name for me and tell me about your relationship to Central State?
My name is Melva Elizabeth Newsom, and I graduated from Central State back when the earth was cooling, and I have adjuncted for them from time to time if I had time and they had need. My husband had worked there for about 40 years, so we live across the street. So we've been connected to Central State. He worked with the football team and traveled some with it as well. So we've been at Central State a lot, whether it was athletics or whatever. After I graduated, we still were connected to the place. It's been part of our lives for most of our lives since we grew up in Xenia. So,
right.
Yeah.
I'm going to get into that too. But tell me about your relationship to WCSU specifically.
WCSU's, of course, across the street as well. And back in the day when radio wasn't, shall we say, as integrated, particularly in an area like Southwest Ohio, that was where we could hear songs we couldn't hear anyplace else played around here. And so WCSU is one of our go-tos to listen to. And they also did a rather good job of politics and other things that because we were a small town place, we were not always plugged in so much to what was happening in the national scene about race, civil rights movement, things like that. So it was a good resource for us to actually be more connected. It also gave us a peek into city life because that wasn't our experience either. So
amazing. So before we get into kind of the details with that experience, tell me when and where you were born.
I was born in Dayton, Ohio, because Xenia did not have a hospital. Technically, if you were a white woman, you could have a baby at a clinic in Xenia, but they would let you come there to be treated, but they would not let you come there to have a baby if you were African American, and my mother was black. So I was born in Miami Valley Hospital in 1948. I was born on St. Patrick's Day.
That's my mother's birthday.
Is it? And interestingly enough, after I had my DNA done, 54% of my DNA comes from Northern Britain. So I decided that was one reason, besides my birthday music, that I liked the Irish a bit. I also liked them because they got discriminated against when they came over here, and I related to them in that. But anyway, so that was where I was born. I was raised in Xenia. Xenia, of course, was segregated. You could not live anywhere. You could live in the East End. And so I lived on East Market. I grew up next to the Black High School, which was connected to the Black Elementary School. So that's what I told people. I was going to be an educator because I grew up every day watching my teachers and everybody go to school, come back and forth to school. And that was my school. When there wasn't any school, that was still my school because I could go over there and do whatever I wanted to do virtually. So, yeah.
Yeah, so grew up in Xenia. Tell me a little bit about the people who raised you.
My father was born in Hampton, Virginia, Robert Mann. His family, there's still a lot of Manns down around Hampton and Currys. Those are cousins. The Currys are my cousins. He was born there. He was one of 12 children. He was about the middle one. He had a little bit of a complex because he was one of the ones that it was Hampton Institute and was only a 2-year college. And the ones after him, it became Hampton University or Campton College, I believe. And so they got 4-year degrees. So that was kind of something that bothered him his entire existence. My mother was an orphan. She was my paternal grandfather was a baker. My paternal grandmother started out as a housekeeper, but she became a librarian eventually. And so it was an interesting family. Almost all of about a half of the people born after my father became teachers. So, that was a big one for African Americans. My mother was born in Hollister, North Carolina, which is an Indian complex up near the border of Virginia and North Carolina. She was orphaned early, and actually one of the interesting things about it, after I went to work at the University of North Carolina, the Duke family for some reason took an interest in the family, and her brothers in particular worked as house people and houseboys and things, and basically grew up with the Dukes in the Dukes household. My Aunt B, her sister, she was the baby. My Aunt B, who was her older sister, probably was one of the first black employees who did not work in like housekeeping at Duke University, because she could pass, and they made her a telephone operator, which I don't think they didn't bother to tell them that she was probably one of the first ones. So I have North Carolina and Virginia roots, but they were here in Ohio long before I was born. My father was brought here in the early 40s because he was a tailor. That was what he'd majored in. And Fairborn, Ohio needed a tailor. The base is over there, and they needed a tailor. And so there was a man who owned a dry cleaning shop, and he said, if you want to come over and work here, I'll give you a wing, and you can have a tailor shop. And he charged him rent and so forth and so on. But we couldn't live in Fairborn because Fairborn was a sundown town. Black people couldn't live there. I'm sorry. I should have turned that off. Thank you. There we go. But yeah, so they told him they could not live in Fairborn, so they lived in Xenia instead. When I was a junior in high school, the base started giving the town grief about not having any black people because the people who were coming here to work at the base, some of them were like colonels and other things, and even then they couldn't live there. So they offered my father a house and told him we could come live in a nice house and he could come live in Fairborn. And I said, I do not want to be the only raisin in the rice pudding at Fairborn High School. So he turned him down.
So how old are you at this point?
I was 17.
Mm.
Yeah. And so I said, nah, please, no. I don't want to be the only black person in a town that didn't have any black people in the schools. So
yeah. Tell me a little bit about your mother.
My mother was a housewife part-time. Then she became the president of Wilberforce University secretary for about, I want to say maybe 15 or 16 years. Then she had a brain tumor and had to have an operation for that. And after that, she worked at Wright Pat for some, but mainly a housewife, more years than not. She was a good cook, very serious about her church, very serious about her clubs, and that kind of thing. Fair-skinned, Indian hair. I am not sure how much Indian was there. As I got older, I started thinking that it was at least a mixture of black and Indian. Maybe that they might have been adopted by Indians. I'm not sure. But anyway, she did have that kind of hair. Little wavy, black, whatever. She was a good mother. She was a fantastic grandmother. We called her Nana. She quit her job at the base to keep our kids when got old enough, got married, had kids, and went to work. She had somebody at her church died. A little boy died that had been going to daycare. They didn't say it was the fault of the daycare, but that was what she decided, that if he hadn't had to go to daycare, he wouldn't have died. So she quit work and kept Wayne's mother, Marguerite, kept my oldest son, Michael, because he was considerably older than the other ones. We just didn't have, we thought we couldn't, then we got surprised. But yeah, and then we had Christopher and Nikki. So she quit work and kept them. Like I said, very good cook. A very good woman, actually.
What's your favorite thing that she would make?
That she would make, definitely, chicken and dumplings to cry for. I've never had any match. Never. Never. Some kind of close, but no, not hers.
Yeah. Do you have any siblings?
I had 2 siblings. My brother, they were 10 and 11 years older than I am. My sister Barbara was 11 years older than I am. My brother Robert was 10 years older than me. Barbara went to the black high school next door and graduated in, I believe, 54, I think. I'm not positive, but about then. And 54 or 55, she graduated from high school. She went to Wilberforce University, started Wilberforce University, got rather engaged with a man who wasn't into education and dropped out, which plagued her for the rest of her life, really. It was kind of like a interesting repeat of my father's dismay that he didn't have a 4-year and only a 2-year, that she was not happy. And my brother finished Central State. He started Hampton. He went to Hampton for 2 years, but my mother developed a brain tumor, and he had to come home for a variety of reasons, including helping to take care of her. She recovered from that completely, by the way. Nothing. There were no problems after that. But he finished Central State, and he got his master's in physics. He had Dr. Engel, who was a little short German white lady, and she loved him. And they got along just beautifully, and he minored in German and majored in physics, because that's what she taught. And he worked at the base for foreign technology, which was basically spies. But we would go pick him up at the airport. You had to go get him whatever time of day he came or night he came in, and he had to have his briefcase was handcuffed to him, and we had to take him to the base. He couldn't bring it home. We had to go to the base. I got tickled because they had to do background checks on his family when he got this job, and they accidentally sent us the results. And I was in high school when he got that job. And it said that I needed to be watched because I was a bit of a radical, because I belonged to SDS, Students for Democratic Society. I got tickled. I thought I got labeled at 15. So yeah, I had 2 siblings. My brother died in, I believe, 13. My sister died in 2014. Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about growing up in Xenia.
Oh, yeah.
Back to that. In the 60s, obviously, there's a lot happening when it comes to segregation and the civil rights movement. And then we're also in a place that has so much Black history before then.
Yep.
Can you talk about, what were y'all thinking about in high school?
Well, in high school, we were trying to figure out white people, probably, because Xenia was truly segregated. I have to tell you, it was a fantastic place to grow up in the East End. Everybody was your mom and dad. There were plenty of stores. The only thing you couldn't do in the East End was You couldn't do things like buy a car, maybe, although there may have been one of those up there. But there were grocery stores, there were drug stores, there were ice cream shops, there were, virtually everything. There were places you could drop off clothes to have them dry cleaned. Virtually anything that you needed to do, you could do. There were places that would fix your car. There's no question about that. Beauty shops, barber shops. Of course, there were places you could go to get buried. There were mortuaries. There were other things like that. But the fantastic thing about it was you knew everybody. And even though at that age group, we probably weren't that happy about it then, but anything you did beat you home. Somebody called your mother and said, I saw Wayne, I saw Cookie. They did this, And so it wasn't a good thing, but I think even at that age, we understood it was a safety net. I think we figured that out. Even then, we did appreciate it enough to know that we've done this, and so I'm conflicted all the time when we start talking about segregation, because in many ways, being segregated for us was a lifestyle that was just so safe, so peaceful. You didn't have to worry about somebody not liking you about race, obviously. We had virtually no white people, although a white lady did live across the street from me. She was married to a black man. But the bottom line is it was just safe. It was home. Everybody was your guardian. And so it's kind of hard to, of course, we all didn't want segregation. So we did make sure that we worked to fight segregation, but we did not feel, at least I never felt, like I was being denied anything. One of the advantages of the school was the school, not just living next door to it, but the dedication of the people who taught there was incredible. Number one, you had to have a 4-year degree to teach at the black school. The white school, you could get a 2-year certificate and teach. So in many ways, we had superior teachers. And our teachers knew what they were fighting for. So they took an interest in us from, dawn till dusk. It wasn't about school hours. And so it was such a conflict that you were living in such a idyllic lifestyle. We had homeless people, a few, but they were definitely homeless by choice. In other words, there was a place, no question about that. So, growing up in that environment, when we went to the high school, there was very little. The boys had a kind of an advantage because they played, Little League was integrated. So see, they could know white boys their age and get to know white boys their age. We didn't have any, the Girl Scouts were not integrated, and so you couldn't make friends with white girls because, you didn't see any white girls. And so when we went there, I think they were probably as trepidatious as we were, honestly. They didn't know what was going to happen. There were a few black kids, I think, all the time somewhere. There were people that were in orphanages or something that sometimes ended up in the white schools. But my brother ended up in the white school because he was a large black boy, and East didn't have a football team. East didn't have enough males to have a football team. So Central came down. Central was the white high school. They came up and picked out 4, my brother included, that year, and made them football players for them. They graduated from down there. So they had a chance to do that, but most of the black boys didn't have a chance to do that. So I was integrated in the 9th grade, which I think would have been 1962, to Central Junior High School. And because the 9th grade, the high school was 10, 11, and 12. And junior high was 7, 8, and 9. And so they integrated us. They had given all of us the test of basic skills, the 8th grade test of basic skills. They put all the black kids in basic classes, all of them, all of us. I didn't even know it. But one of my father's acquaintances, Bishop Ransom, found out, and he told my dad. He and my dad went down and raised holy hell, and they put me and Louis Ransom, who's one of Wayne's cousins, into the academic track because they got told on. I have to say, I never had another black teacher after I was in the 9th grade. Never. There were a few at the high school, but they were mainly people that taught driving, home ec, things like that, not academic classes. That they tried to make sure that did not happen. I think we were also scared of what was going to happen with each other. My class of 66 seems to have been extraordinarily good at getting along. I still have friends, white friends, from class of 66. I don't believe the people before us, and certainly not the ones after us, because things started eating up race-wise. And questions began to be asked about some things that we probably didn't know to ask about. Let's put it that way. But our class might have been in a little bit of a wallow that we were actually so happy that we found out we liked each other better than we liked our parents. So we got along very, very well. We really did. Some people, my husband and our current superintendent, who's a black man, who's decided that we're actually his parents, have decided that was not a normal thing, that there were certain of us black kids who did better with accommodating and fitting in than others. I personally don't know that. I just know that I had no issues with no teacher ever treated me. Matter of fact, quite the opposite. My white teachers treated me like my black teachers. I mean, that's the closest I can come. It's particularly the French teachers. That's how I ended up majoring. One of my majors was French. Both of them had me come to their house for extra tutoring so they could put me in state tests and things like that. I'd never heard of, and my 6th grade teacher had put me in tests, a black woman, beautiful black woman. She was my mentor, actually, but she put me in tests, but I didn't have any clue that would happen down there. So mine was different. My experience, I'll give you that academically. They did both. It was funny because Martha Lighthizer was the name of the high school French teacher, very dramatic woman. And when I got ready to do my student teaching from Central State, of course, I wasn't going to go back and do it with Martha. And I walked in the classroom, and she said, "I'm so glad you're here." I said, "Why?" She said, "I'm sick. I'm going to have surgery. So I'm going to be leaving after Monday." So my student teacher, I was the teacher, and they paid me. Probably all illegal, but a small town, so that was funny. So I wasn't the student teacher, I was the teacher. I taught French, and she came back at the end of the year and thanked me, and we had a good time. So, yeah. Wow. Yeah. So high school was fun for me. Wayne and I were started going together in the 9th grade. He would have been he's 2 years older, so he'd have been a junior. So I got to go to the prom 3 times instead of 2 times. And so it was, we did all the things you do. You went to dances. We had a dance at the Y every Friday night after the football games and whatever, or not after, instead of when we didn't have football anymore. We had dances, and at the beginning of those Y dances, they would play white music and the white kids would dance. And then they would play black music and the black kids would dance. But as time went by, that kind of got different. Everybody danced for everybody's stuff because the music began to be more similar. We began to hear the people bringing some more interesting white music into that we actually liked, and the white kids got used to the black music. The funny part was the white boys didn't want to dance, period, most of the time. So the black guys got to dance quite a bit.
What was the kind of music that you listened to
Well,
at that time? What did you like to listen to?
I was very fond of the slow dances and things like that, obviously. I mean, that's what you're going to be grabbing on each other and stuff. So needless to say, that's more fun than the jitterbugging. And I wasn't good at the jitterbugging. That was not really my long thing. That was my long one. And Wayne was a good dancer. He's a better dancer than I am, but he would dance the jitterbug. No, it wasn't the jitterbug. It was just what they call fast dancing. But I was not that fond of that. That was not my coordination level. But the slow dancing, I enjoyed. All of the groups that were crooners, basically. Those were my groups. And I liked some of the white music that came along, Beatles, things like that. I liked some of the British invasion.
Yeah. And were you listening to the radio at home?
I'd listen to the radio if I was doing something else, but primarily no. I was pretty a quiet person about anything like that. And we didn't have... My brother and sister were big into records, so our records were pretty old. Like I said, they were 10, 11 years older than me. I think I got a 6th grade, I got a record player and some records. But I don't remember ever buying a lot. We had record stores in Xenia, of course, but I don't remember wanting... The radio was plenty. I didn't go buy records. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit more about kind of the end of your high school career, what you were thinking about next when you were in high school.
I was going to be a teacher from the time I was 4.
Okay.
I used to put my dolls on the stairs of our house and teach them, so there was no question. Between my father's angst over not having gotten a 4-year degree, and of course my mother, she was an orphan. There was no way she was going to get a 4-year degree. She graduated from high school, but between the two of them and their adoration of degrees, I knew I was going to college somewhere. I thought maybe eventually I would end up at Hampton, but by the time we got to... My father died the year I graduated from high school.
I'm sorry.
And had never been sick, had passed the physical for a insurance policy about a month before, but he dropped dead at work. By that time, he was working as a salesman. He sold suits and stuff at a men's store. He wasn't practicing tailoring anymore. And so he dropped dead at work. They said it was a massive heart attack, came out of nowhere. And so by that time, my choices were going to be Central State or Wilberforce. Since Mom had worked at Wilberforce for quite a while and still had some connections there, it was going to be relatively cheap to go to Wilberforce, but she thought Central State had more majors, and I wanted to major in French. I don't believe at that point you could major in French at Wilberforce University, so that cut it down to Central State. So yeah, so I knew I was going to go to college. I didn't know where because Dad was still alive when I graduated, but it was going to be CSU, which was fine. CSU is a different place, a very different place. The academia was still segregated, so I don't care how good of a professor you were if you were black. We have people over here teaching. Dr. Jackson, the airport's named for. He is an internationally known person in aviation. Dr. Smith, who taught in the science, had worked with Fermi about the atomic bomb in Chicago. I mean, we have folks that were internationally known. I had teachers that were internationally known in their subject matters, going to Paris to give lectures and things like that. So it wasn't a step down by any stretch of the imagination. as was quickly demonstrated when we started getting integrated, because they started sucking them out like nobody's business. All of a sudden, everybody got offered a job at more money in a different place. And I mean, probably when I was a junior, I probably saw the largest diaspora. Dr. McStallworth was taken over by Wright State. I mean, and started the Belinga Center. I mean, it's just, it's why it's painful now. It's why it's painful now. It is, because I know what I got. And I know what they're getting. It doesn't compare. It does not compare. I just can't even. I mean, Stokely Carmichael came and spoke to our history class. Wow. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we got. Wow. We got Martin Luther King to come and speak. We had, if they were there on campus, they were walking around, they would talk to you. It was like New York, only in Southern Ohio. We got everything. My favorite professor over there, my mentor, I taught out of her text, a text co-authored by her the first year I taught in Xenia, from a national publisher. I mean, that was what we were. And so it just, the professors lived over there. They lived on campus. And you were at their house in the evenings. When you had a club, if you had a sorority or whatever meeting, you could have it at their house and they talked to you. When I went over, and that's another reason me and Cynthia didn't get along. When I went over, that they asked me to adjunct. And when I came back from Carolina, and I said, I'll do one class for the School of Education. I ended up doing 3 classes of the School of Education and helping supervise student teaching. Because I was so frustrated by what I didn't see. And what they didn't seem to care. So the first semester I taught, no, it was the second because it was springtime. The second semester I taught, I told the people in the department, I'm going to have my classes, I've taught, I think it was up to 2 then, I don't think it was 3, over for a barbecue. The last day of class. We're going over to my house, walk across the street, Wayne will barbecue for us. And I invited them all. I said, you're all welcome to come. We, sit out in the yard, sit in the house, whatever. They all were horrified. I wouldn't have students at my house. They're liable to steal. The kids were spectacular. A lot of them were not well educated. We worked a lot on grammar, a lot on writing, things like that. But they were eager, and they were cooperative, and they were grateful. And they said, well, they'll just probably be there for 10 minutes. They stayed here all afternoon, played Uno and everything. That was the good Central State I went to. That was my school. My professor was within reach. If I needed something, I could go over there and say, I need something. Dr. Wilhelmina Robinson was my mentor. And she was the one, she was serious. She was definitely serious. And she was just spectacular. And again, I taught out of her textbook she co-authored the first year I taught high school. She was the one that got Stokely to come. And he said he wasn't gonna, he walked in and Xenia kids came out here because Wright State was a building with one building in a cornfield. So we had about 30% of our classmates came out here. And he walked in and saw white kids and he said, I'm not gonna speak while they're here. Dr. Robinson took him out in that hall. He came back in and he spoke. So that was her. That was her. And like I said, our Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society was met at her house over here. I can't describe the difference. You can't describe the difference. That's all there is to it. It was a different world. Yeah. And so when I see, at one point I thought, well, they've gone to getting kids who they shouldn't have. But after adjuncting over there, And after practically teaching full time for a year or so over there, it's not the kids. It's not the kids. A lot of them have gotten an inferior K-12. There's no question. But they're smart and they're ready. They want it. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have a problem with absenteeism in my classes. I didn't have a problem with being uncooperative. I had a couple of them that were kind of shaky on their homework, and we had to have some chit chats. But it's just not the kids. And I finally told Wayne, I said, I can't do it. I said, the printer's broken. I had to call on my connections at other colleges. The bookstore had not paid for the books, and so they couldn't get the books at the beginning of the fall semester. They said it would be October or later before they could get the books. And so I said, well, maybe I can copy. I have textbooks. The printer was broken all the time. Fortunately, I had enough friends at other colleges that I said, Clark State, I had friends there because I had worked there at one point. And I talked to the president, and she said, it's a state school. Just send it to our press people, and they'll do them. But if I hadn't had those resources, I couldn't have taught. They told us to put our syllabi on the internet by a certain date. I believe I was the only person in the department that did. They did not coordinate with financial aid about when money needed to be refunded to the students. So they set the date. You had to have a background check so that you could go in and do observations. If you were in the Department of Education, in order to get into schools, you had to have a background check. They're $69. And they did not coordinate with financial aid, so the kids hadn't gotten their refunds yet. And when I went and said something, they said, oh, everybody's got $69. I said, have you lost your minds? Of course a couple of us lost quite a few $69. I told them they could pay me back in 5 years. But I mean,
Yeah, this is not on my list of things, but I'm like getting emotional hearing you talk about this.
I know.
Because I went to an HBCU and I had the professor that was like you. The professor that was showing up, that was buying my books, that was making sure I was okay out of class.
Right.
And we need that.
Yeah.
And we need these institutions, and we need the people that are...
We know we need that.
Right.
We know that we need that more. Because a lot of our kids are coming here as kind of a last grasp of getting out of what they've been in. And I just, they're so grateful and so eager and so ready. And they're bright. Their thought processes are fine. It's just their skills sometimes, a lot of them haven't had a lot of background. In other words, people in their household didn't necessarily read a lot. They're not going to go have books from floor to ceiling. And I mean, let's be honest, a lot of their parents are engaged in making sure that they had something to eat and something to wear. So I'm not cracking on the parents. I'm saying the situation was what it was. You know that, and you know that that's over there, and you know that it's needed, and yet they acted like they were angry at the kids for not having more money. I mean, I was like, that's not their fault. That's not their fault. But that's what they acted like. They acted like they were angry at the kids for not having money, and they acted like they were supposed to punish the kids, or they were supposed to keep them in line. They didn't act like they were supposed to care for them. And I was like, I don't. And I told him, I said, I can't. I said, I'm going to have a stroke over here. I said, because I get so mad. I'm going to have a stroke.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I mean, we need, and I want to talk a little bit more about, like, your education as an educator and like how you've developed your style and philosophy around teaching and education, because I think we need the teachers that are invested, the teachers that are that have been wanting to do it, that have the inclination to teach and to nurture in that way. But then when you have those people, you got to treat them well, right? Like, you can't have educators, mad and angry when they're here, like, supporting and trying to do the good work.
I couldn't teach anymore. Not anywhere. I couldn't teach anywhere now because the attitude is different. The attitude at even places, University of North Carolina is a good school, but, and of course I didn't teach there, really. I mean, I'd sat on some committees. I sat on some, like, dissertation and whatever. I didn't really teach. But the attitude is now almost too many places, and not everybody, but it's let's get this kid out of here so they can get a job. It's not let me develop his mind, help him figure out what critical thinking is, get him some history so he can understand what's happened before so that we don't repeat it. Things like make them understand the complexity of things like race, gender, sexual orientation, and everything else. That's what we have to do. But they don't own the kids. I used to tell my children when I taught high school, I said, when they came in the first day, I said, I'm going to have you for 9 months like your mother. I said, and from now until you die, I'm going to take partial credit for your victories and partial blame for your defeats. I said, so get used to me. I have more than 400 former students who are friends with me on Facebook, high school and college. So I think they quite a few of them took it to heart. They're still my babies. They might be old babies. I started teaching at 23 and some of them were 18, so some of them are old babies, but they're still my babies. That's all there is to it.
Okay. Let's backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
To when you got to Central State. You came in as an education major. Okay. What other things were you doing on campus? You mentioned Phi Theta Kappa. Hang out with my friends. I got married my sophomore year, so I was, and which was actually good because by that time he was working at Central State and it was free. Which is why I ended up with 3 majors. So I finally got called into the administration building. They said, you have enough credits for a major in history, French, and political science. You got to leave. So I did everything on campus. I wasn't in any, I just in, honorary society, but I wasn't in any other. I wasn't a person who would have been in a sorority. I do not take direction well from anyone. Never have. I was the baby by a lot in my family. It was somebody's responsibility to make me happy. And I have been a very blessed, fortunate person because almost my entire 77 years it has been somebody's job to make me happy. And that is the honest to goodness truth. We just had a conference. We had a little gathering. We were putting together a steering committee for the zoning. I'm a zoning commissioner for the township. And we played a game called Two Truths and a Lie, where you tell some people that don't know you 2 things that are true and they try to figure it out. I told them I've never said anything inappropriate by a male in my entire life. I've never had a male say anything nasty to me in my entire life. So one of the women said, I cannot believe that. I said, we were talking, me and some old girlfriends, women of a certain age, as the French would say, were talking about it, and I was sitting there listening to them talk about men having said inappropriate things.
And I told him that, and they all looked at me like, you've lost your... But that's the truth. I've never been called a nigger. And I've been writing about race since I was probably 25. Never. In person, I was called in, I was getting hate mail at one point about an issue here in Greene County. But I was writing for the newspaper. And, but never, I did get called a nigger. One person did say it, but I've never been called a nigger in person. I've been a very fortunate person. Virtually everybody, I know this sounds really bad and sappy, almost everybody's been nice to me, and that's the honest to goodness truth. I've got people that, when I wrote for the newspaper, it was almost always about race, racism, whatever, and I have people who I know in Xenia that are racist that would come up to me and tell me, I loved your article. And I think, did you read it? It was about you. I mean, but people, honest to goodness, I don't know what it is. I smile a lot. Maybe that's it. But everybody's nice to me almost. I rarely had anybody be mean to me. When I was in high school, and particularly in junior high, girls fought. Sometimes girls, I don't know, they were jealous or something of each other. Or maybe they fought over a boy. I don't know. But girls fought. I never had any girl try to fight me. I've never been in a fight. So I told people I've kind of drifted through. I'm not sure. I'm not complaining. Knock on wood. Yeah.
It's a blessing, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the climate on campus when you got
CSU?
There at CSU?
CSU was fun from the get-go, simply because I had the best of both worlds. I had people who would come from Xenia High School with me, mm-hmm. and they would sit in the union, and we taught them to play bid whist, and they taught us to play euchre. And then I had people I'd never seen before, and I was in classes. And, of course, when you're from a little teeny town like Xenia, you're kind of interested in those, Philadelphia people and, those kind of people. You want to see if they're different from you or whatever. Found out they weren't. But so it was a good experience. It was a very good experience. There was a very strong civil rights. Obviously, like I told you, we had the big boys come and talk and big girls come and talk. All of them hit campus. I imagine they hit most of the HBCUs, but they certainly did. I think we were a little bit luckier because so many of them lived up this way. The ones that lived up north would come, they would not venture as far south, at least not as much. So we got just virtually anybody we wanted to come and speak to you, and not just they didn't just come and speak in the auditorium. They came and spoke to your classes. So you got to learn a lot of things about what they were doing and a lot of things that we would not have been exposed to because the national media wouldn't even have covered it. So yeah, it was a great learning place. There's no question about that. And everybody was on the same page. By the way, we had great white teachers too. We really did. We had great white teachers that they weren't giving up anything either. Matter of fact, some of them I think went a little further than the black people. They were serious. So we had people over there that were, you probably have a couple over there still. I mean, not the same ones, Lord knows, but there's probably a couple over there still, that you could find that would be in that category of a real advocate, a real person that's going to take care of business if they get an opportunity. But there was no question about what the campus position was or the people who worked there.
Do you remember any protests or days of action or anything that happened?
We had
while
black
you were
protests,
students?
but our black protests were against the administration because they did something we didn't like. We demonstrated all the time. If we didn't like it, we demonstrated. We closed down the administration building all the time. That was part of the time. We marched in Xenia. We marched out here. Yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you remember? I guess this would have been a little before you got here, but do you remember when WCSU got on air? Were you aware? I think 1962 was when it first...
Yeah, that was before me.
Yeah.
I didn't get out here till 1966.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't remember. I don't. It was always there.
It was always there.
Yeah.
So what was your relationship with it when you were a student? Were students Into the radio?
Students were into it, but it seemed to me that the main thing the students used it for was later at night, like when you were studying. That was the primary. I don't remember it being on in dorm rooms a lot, because my two best friends from Xenia, two of my best friends, white girls both, they came out here and lived in the dorms. So I was out here with them quite a bit. But I don't remember them. Usually you were talking when you were in the dorm. You were sitting up. We didn't have microwaves, so we had popcorn poppers, and so you could pop popcorn and sit up all night and eat popcorn and tell the world what it should be doing. I tried to learn to smoke, because that was the other thing. The cool girls all smoked, and popcorn and smoke. I failed miserably. My throat was sore. My eyes watered. So I had to give that up. I had to give up the opportunity to smoke. It didn't work out. So I couldn't be too cool, because I couldn't get that place. But I don't remember listening to it a lot. Like I said, when we were all together, we talked, because we were solving the problems of the world. So.
Yeah. So, class of 71,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when did you move into this house?
82.
82. Okay, so before we get here, what do you do after you graduate?
I taught my first year. Mm-hmm. I was supposed to be teaching in Xenia. They had promised me a job, and early. And then their they had put a lot of the black principals and others that were up in the administration in the black schools. They had put them into positions where they wouldn't have to interact with kids, So Mr. Page, who was the principal of the black high school, was the person who was in charge of employment. And he had promised me a job, and then he forgot about it. So I was ready to go to work, and there was no job. So I ended up teaching in Cedarville, Ohio, which was, again, I have gotten so many opportunities that I never picked. It just fell, and it did so much for me. I learned. We don't even need to talk about teaching. I learned so much that year. First and foremost, I was hired by Mr. Empson, who was the superintendent. Mr. Guthrie, who was the principal, was on vacation. Both white men, of course. Mr. Guthrie was not fond of black people. I was the first black teacher they hired. So when he came, I didn't know anything about this. So I was just happy to have a job, since I had kind of gotten screwed out of my first one. He came, the first thing he said to me was, "I don't know how the kids are going to like you. They've never had a black teacher before." That's what he said to me before hello. I thought, well, this doesn't sound good. Mr. Empson was nice to me, whatever. And Mr. Guthrie was afraid of me. He wasn't he wasn't mean to me. He was afraid of me. And so my class, that was the old Cedarville High School. And so my classroom, this is my classroom. There was a door. That's my door to come into the classroom. That's a door to like a book repository, and it's got glass in the top of it. That's how he observed me. He didn't come in the room. He stood on the other side and looked at me through the door. The only thing I got a superior in was my appearance. The kids loved me. And we had a blast, and it was so, because they noticed how he acted, and they made fun of him and everything. But I learned so much. These kids were farmers. I mean, y'all thought Xenia was little. They were farmers. I had Chandra Miller, whose father owned a turkey farm, and it started raining one day, and she said, "I got to go home." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Turkeys are stupid. They're out today because we thought it was going to be nice." She said, "If they will look up to see where the rain's coming, the water's coming from, and drown when the water runs down their noses." She said, "I got to go home and help my dad put the turkeys up." And they had one policeman, Ralph, And so when the siren would go, all the kids would say, "Get him, Ralph!" And then one day I said, "Where are all the kids?" They said, "Oh, it's lambing season." I said, "Are they delivering lambs?" They said, "No, they're cutting lamb's tails off." I said, "Cutting lamb's tails off? They're only about this long." They said, "They're after we cut them off." And I said, I told them, I said, "I learned more this year than I taught, trust me." I really did, but the kids were great, absolutely great. And we had a blast, but I said, "I'm not coming back," because it was just too much with Mr. Guthrie. So my second year, my favorite year of teaching, actually, which I should have stayed. I was looking for work. I wanted a job, obviously. I hadn't been able to find one because there just weren't that many openings. And I only had 1 year of experience. So Dayton called in about maybe the third week in September. They called. "We have a job at Roosevelt High School, inner city school." I said, "Okay, I'll take it." Oh, God, I could talk for longer than an hour about Roosevelt. Roosevelt had, I don't know how many children that they had. It was an enormous 3 or 4 huge school. One white boy. that was I didn't have him. I taught history, American history, and I taught government. So I had juniors and seniors. Some of my kids worked at Frigidaire all night. Came to school the next day. Some of my girls worked. So I went in, put my little picture. I had Mike by then, my son. I had a picture of Mike and my Cocker Spaniel on my desk. And they ignored me totally, like I didn't exist the first day. About the third day, I left them alone. I just wrote stuff on the board, told them what we were going to be doing. Third day, I had probably 10 kids pull their desks up. I said, if you want to learn, come up front. By the end of the week, the ones in the back started saying, "Well, what are we? You don't want to teach us." What? I said, "You're welcome to come up and join the group." So we started, and it's hard to talk about. Most of my kids had never had a birthday cake. So I made birthday cakes. We celebrate birthdays. Each week of the month, we'd have birthday cakes. I'd bring 2 cakes in, and we'd have small slivers sing, just so. I said, I can't see a 19-year-old never had a birthday cake. I can't do it. So we had birthday cakes. I had a boy who'd been a troublemaker. Oh, the school principal had told me to give me her purse. Give her my purse. When I got there, I said no. She said, "You can't take it up there. They'll steal." I said, "Then they're going to steal. I'm not treating them like that, wife. No." So I didn't give it to her. I never lost a thing. I had one boy who'd been a troublemaker. And he started coming before I left school every day. And he would ask to borrow something. A pen. An eraser. And I finally went and asked the counselor at the school, I said, "Why is he asking me?" And every morning he'd be there to give it back. She said, "He wants to make sure you come back. Because so many other teachers don't come back." That was a year. It was a year. I had a kid call me and tell me his mother was entertaining a man in the house and had put him and his siblings out on the back porch, and it was 30 degrees. In Dayton, I'm in Xenia. I called, and I did actually know somebody that worked in the child care, and they went and got them. But I mean, but the kids, I got so tickled. I had a boy worked Frigidaire all night, and he wore earrings. And I said, I'm a country person. I'm not comfortable with you sitting in my class in earrings. He said, well, you got on earrings. I said, I'll take mine off, you take yours off. So we did. And so, I mean, that was the whole thing. It was the whole year. We were compromising, learning each other, having a blast. I hated that I didn't go back, but I got pregnant with Christopher. And a job came open in Xenia, and I said, I need to be closer to home. But it was my favorite year of teaching. When I was working on my doctorate, many years later, I did a lot of talking to that school system about some of the things I saw that were unfortunately the same way in those buildings when I was doing research in Dayton. I had a woman tell me there wasn't any point in trying to teach them because they weren't going to learn anything anyway. And she was coming to work every day, picking up a check. So that was my entree into it. And that was the reason I was going to make sure that whatever I did with my education, it was going to hopefully make a difference in black children's education, even if I wasn't teaching in a black system. My dissertation is on white teacher practices with black children. Wow. I know. It still gets me. What was that, 1973, maybe, or two? I taught 71, 72, 70, yeah, this was 72, 73. Yeah, it still gets me. I still think about those kids. I do. Most of them had never been more than 4 or 5 blocks from their house, ever. Never.
Sorry, I need a minute.
I know, but and we treat them like we treat children like they're all experiencing the same thing, and that ain't what's happening, people. Yeah. And I just cannot get, that's what I told them. I said, you do what you have to do for your children. And so I couldn't teach now because there's so many, we can't do this, you can't do that, you better not say this, I couldn't survive. I'd be fired. I'd be gone. I said, no, honey, you can't do that now.
Okay. So you're back in Xenia in 73.
Uh-huh. I taught at Warner Junior High School, taught 9th graders, taught American history and French. Mm-hmm. Had a blast. I knew half the kids' parents and everything else by then. So I had a great time at Warner. I taught at Warner 73 to 89, and then I taught at the high school. I quit to get my master's because in those days you couldn't get your master's in history with part-time. Mm-hmm. You had to go straight through. So I got my master's in U.S. history for 1867.
Where'd you get your master's from?
Wright State.
From Wright State.
Right. I'm a PhD from UD. Wright State. I stayed home. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about 74 and the tornado.
Oh, you talk about misery.
I mean, I think in talking about CSU and WCSU and the legacy of resilience of that institution, I think that moment keeps coming up with everybody that I talk to, just about the ability to persist and, so I'm just curious about, I don't know, from your perspective.
Dr. Newsom, I used to call him Uncle Lionel, teasingly, we were not related, was a very good president. He was our last academic president, actually, before Jack Thomas, which they didn't keep for any time at all because he was too academic. My classmate, John Garland, was a lawyer. But not what I call an academic. He's an attorney. He's not an educator. I don't know that he ever taught anybody anything. So Dr. Newsom was my favorite for a lot of reasons, including the fact that he liked to play around and treat us like we were family as well. And he did a good job of bringing the school back as much as he could, but the school has never been the same since the tornado, not only physically, but also academically and just every way. It's not the same. The attitude seems to have changed about what it was supposed to be. Before the tornado, there was no question that it was a real HBCU. The underlayment of the place was social justice. I do not now, and I always give a caveat and say maybe they just aren't good publicists, okay? But I don't see any lectures. I don't see any publications. I don't see anything that has a basis in social justice. I see people talk about their own particular discipline, which sometimes has a social justice bent, but most of it's about agriculture. There isn't any discrimination that I know of between lilies and roses, so I don't see exactly. I have no problem with them having. I like the people over here a lot. I think the agriculture department is one of the more accomplished departments, and they're very nice people. All of them, almost all of them are white, which is not surprising because we don't have a lot of farmers around here, that's for sure, and we don't have a lot of people who major in agriculture around here. But they're all nice, cooperative. They've been very outreaching to me, after I became a part of the, my front yard is now the botanical garden. But they're very cooperative. They're very considerate of us. We get invited to everything they do. And they offer us free fish when they change the fish tanks and everything else. And I love that part of it. It's really nice. I'm a country girl, basically. But the college has lost its way. First, it lost its way in not understanding that black students are not going to be treated the same way with the same anything, virtually, that you would treat all white students. It's not the same cat. I've taught plenty of white kids. I've taught plenty of black kids. They're very, very similar in many ways, but there's many, many ways that they are not ever going to be similar. I just had a very long discussion and pointed discussion with a white person when they were trying to tell me something about black people. I said, I'm 77 years old. My amount of on-the-job training is enough if I'd never stepped foot in a college. Trust me. I said, every black person knows more about being black than any white person. I said, think about this. I don't know what it's like to be a man. No matter how much I study males, no matter how much I study it, I will never know as much about being a man as a man. But y'all have problems. You think if you study us, and number one, the vast majority of black people lie to you. They don't want to talk to you about it. They know there's no point. They don't want to get into it with you because they know you're never going to understand it because you're not open-minded enough because you've been raised to believe I'm one thing. That's it. You've been raised to believe I'm one thing. I gotta tell you, I did a lot of presenting in my early academics after I got my PhD, a lot. Every conference you could go to, AERA, any place, university professors, I went, I presented. Do you know the number one comment I got from Seattle to Washington, D.C.?
Tell me.
I wouldn't think of you as black. I told them everything I talked about was black. Everything I brought up was black. Everything. I'm the blackest person you'll ever meet. I eat, sleep, drink black. Always have. And every one of them said to me, I got offered a job at Hofstra University. The first thing the man said to me when he walked up to me, I was at AERA in Seattle. And he came up and he said, I really think you'd make a great addition to our campus. And the second thing he said is, I really wouldn't think of you as black. And I was like, I felt like saying, what? What? I know. Okay, I give you. You know, I got the high yeller. I got it. But ain't nothing not black about me. I mean, you know, anything you bring up, probably I'm gonna lead it back to black because that's what I study. That's what people get upset. You're always bringing up race. I said, race is what I study. I've got connections. I can make a connection with anything you say. Or I can make a racial connection with anything. And so, why wouldn't I? Because I know you don't know it, number one. And so, it was just fascinating to me. That was the number one comment I got at all the lectures I gave, all the speeches I gave. The people who came up and congratulated me, virtually all the white people said, I really wouldn't think of you as black. I was gobsmacked. I had never had that before in my entire life. And I still get it. I still get people. There's an advantage. I get forgiven. I do get some opportunities to talk about race that they wouldn't let other people do. I'll admit that part. But it's still like I'm one of them. Don't know. But yeah, it's fascinating. I need to get a drink of water. Let's stop for a second. You can sit over here close to Olivia. She doesn't mind if you sit there. There, you can sit right there. Sit down. Be a good boy. That's a good boy. Okay. Or did you want to go in that window? Do whatever you need to do. Okay.
Now I want to talk about your PhD and then your time in North Carolina. I think that's where we'll resume.
Let me tell you first, funny. I was a Library of Congress. I was a Library of Congress fellow in 2002, 2003. I had sit. I was had the opportunity to be there and had to do residencies. Some of them were week long, some of them were a little bit longer, and some of them were only like 4 days. I think there were, I can't remember, either 10 or 11. So I'd have to fly to D.C., stay and work and go to the library. And so I was in D.C., and I get a phone call at the hotel where I was staying, and it's from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And they said, we have a job that we want you to do, and it's a newly created position, and we need you to do it. And we think it'd be perfect for you, so we want to interview you. And I was like, I didn't apply for a job at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I don't think, how did you get my phone number? And they said, your secretary gave us your phone number. And I said, okay. I was going to say, I'm going to talk to her. But I told them I didn't want to. They said, well, please, give us a chance. Come down. It's a newly created position. I thought, well, it's a trip to North Carolina. I'll take it. So I went down there, and they put me up in a place that looked like it should have been Tara from Gone with the Wind. It's called the Carolina Inn. White columns in the front and everything. I felt like I should have had a rag on my head to go in the kitchen. So I said, this is not going to work. This is too Southern. This is not my idea of, I'm going to have a hard time keeping my mouth shut down here. I can tell them that. As a matter of fact, I had told them that on the phone. I said, I'm a black person who does not watch her mouth, so I don't think I'm going to work well in the South. And they were like, oh, no, it's a liberal school. That was the first lie they told me. But I went. They were nice and just sweet as could be. Everybody treated me like a piece of Jesus. There's no question about that. But I still just didn't feel it. So I Told them no thank you and came back home. They upped the ante a couple of times and said, please, please come back and give us another shot. They did. I went. I said, well, they seem pretty determined. The money's better than what I'm making. Wayne's getting ready to retire, so I thought. So we can go. Move to North Carolina. Okay. Kids are all gone, away from home. So I went down, and they had hired me, had come after me, to do a diversity assessment of the college. And I said, okay. And so I put together a team. We did a diversity assessment. Took a year and a half. Had student assistants, had a committee, and everything else. We did it. We finished with our plan for that. From now on, they would be filling out. They would be doing a report every spring, and that I would send them questions that they needed to send me back with data and so forth and so on. So we were going to do fine. Finished that, and my boss, Archie, I said, I'm done. What do I do? He said, go meet people. There's no job. Because this is a new job. It doesn't have a job description. The only job description was to do a diversity assessment. I said, go meet people. Wait. Literally, I had to make my own job, which had its advantages, needless to say. But it was incredible. Carolina was very good to me. I never asked for anything they didn't give me. That's all I can say. I enjoyed that, and there were lovely people. I still have friends. I was laughing. We have a Christmas Eve open house, and people come here. We don't even know who's coming. You know what I'm saying? Some people moved away from here. Two of my friends from North Carolina, a couple, had a death they didn't say anything to me, a black couple. They had a death up in Michigan, and she's from Michigan originally. They didn't tell me, but they showed up here Christmas Eve. So I have a lot of friends still from Carolina too, and it's fun. But like I said, it was a wonderful, wonderful. Number one, Chapel Hill, the Triangle is not the South. I lived in Cary, North Carolina, and no, that is not the South. My neighbor on this side was from New York. My neighbor on this side was from China. So, and I did have some fun times going sometimes places where it was country, but that's a whole nother story. My PhD, I told you what it was going to be on. White teacher questioning practices of black. I was trying to figure out something I could calibrate or gather data on of how the difference that I saw between how white teachers taught or treated black kids and treated white kids. And I found out I was very lucky. I was asked to be part of a research team that was sponsored by basically a right-wing group, a right-wing think tank at Dayton, University of Dayton. I was one of 4 doctoral students that was we were asked to be part of the research group, along with two professors, several others that were part-timers. So my data collection was quadrupled. In other words, they gathered the data for me for my topic, and I gathered data for their topics. So we each had 4 streams feeding in instead of 1. So that made us have much bigger databases so we could be more comfortable about what we actually found out. And what I had observed and what I wanted to pursue was, when I was in classrooms observing, the main difference I saw between the questions that the white teacher asked the white student and the black student was the white students were asked questions that involved thoughts, opinions, knowledge base. The black kids were offered questions that are like, how much is 2 and 2? No wiggle, no exploration, no expansion. And that was almost across the board. They knew they were being observed. So my presumption, or my assumption was, they want to make sure the kids answer the questions correctly. They have more faith in their white students with the more complex questions than they have with their black students. So we're going to stick to bare facts with the white ones. We're going to give an opportunity to expand and talk about thought. And it was all the way through every school. So that was what I had kind of gotten to that point earlier than that. I had noticed a difference even when I was in studying other things to find out that the kids were not being treated as people who could be thinkers. They were being taught facts, and that was it.
Yeah. So, in the timeline of your career, when did the PhD in the North Carolina job happen? Was the PhD...
The PhD happened in, 2000, and I got the offer in 2001 from Carolina.
And then you lived in Cary for a little bit.
But I got offers before I finished my PhD. I got the offer at Hofstra before I finished my PhD. I was finishing it. I mean, I got an offer, 2 schools in the South, 1 girls' school, 1 in Georgia. I got a lot of offers for PhD, for college jobs, really, actually. Hofstra was the only one I turned down that I wish I didn't have to, but I had to. Coming from Xenia, Ohio, in your 50s to New York City. My son was living in New York City at that point, actually. And so I knew too much about what it took to live in New York City. There's no way I could have lived on Long Island. I couldn't have afforded it. They were very frank about that. Although they did send a limo to pick me up at the airport. That was the sign and all. I got offered a job at 3 other places. Virginia Tech. No, not Virginia Tech. Virginia, I can't remember. But in another school in Virginia. But Hofstra was persistent. I mean, they called me and wanted me to come. And I just told them, I said, I wouldn't be able to drive a car. I've never had public transpo. It would take me a while to get used to riding the subway to work. And I don't know anyone, and I'm not real familiar with city living, and I'm getting a little long in the tooth in that. And my husband's still working, so at least the beginning of it, I'd have to be there by myself, although my son is in Brooklyn. But it was just too much difference. Mm-hmm. You go to Chapel Hill, it's like Xenia, actually. Not very different in its pace, shall we say. So I didn't. I did have regrets after it, because that would have been my academic career for real. They wanted me in the classroom and, doing the things that you do in the classroom and writing more and stuff like that. But Carolina was good too. I mean, like I said, it was duck soup, actually. So.
And so, after that, you come back to this house?
After I left Carolina?
After you left Carolina?
Yeah, we just closed this house up.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'd come home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and yeah.
And so, curious about how the view outside this window here has changed over the years. Thinking about when you moved in, after in the early 2000s.
When I moved in 82, I was still feeling pretty close to Central State. Not only was Wayne working over there all the time, of course, but we were friends with a lot of the people over there. And quite a few of the kids, because like I said, I would tutor the football team because he worked with the football team. And they'd come over here. I had to change my foyer chandelier because they couldn't get under it. They would walk into it. They were so big. So we were really close to the college in those days. But times changed and things changed and people changed. The only way I can describe it is that the administration became more covert. That's about the only way. They were not wanting to be friends with the community like the previous ones had. People began to retire, of course, that we'd known, that were still there. And maybe that had something to do with it. But the things we had been invited to, typically dances, banquets, things like that got to be left. Well, actually, they got to be fewer and fewer. It wasn't so much we weren't invited as they weren't having them. So a lot of the social life over there died out. At one point, the faculty was, of course, almost all black. And so if the Kappas had a dance or, whatever, they'd invite us over for one. There got to be fewer and fewer Kappas. So there weren't any dances and there weren't any social events that teas and things that used to be over there. And you could trust we still get invited to stuff, but it's more like a lecture about something or, it's not social. So, yeah. But and there are just changes over there. I'm not a very religious person. I was a great little Bible thumper until I was about 21, and then I just had a kind of an epiphany, and that kind of went bye-bye. Too many people who are very religious are not very nice. So I kind of backed down off of what that was. But like the choir over there only sings religious songs, I think. I don't hear any just choir. And that's a state school. Church and state, things like that started happening. And I'm like, this isn't kosher. And forget the pun. But that's not, there are people who would go over there that would be uncomfortable with that constantly. And they don't seem to mind. They don't care about that. So the school changed. That's all there is to it. Less emphasis on social justice, less emphasis on learning, as far as I could see. Like I was saying, when I found out there was an attrition rate of 50%, that half the kids that come don't stay for the second semester, or didn't when I did the research years ago. I was like, why aren't we hearing alarm bells? Why aren't we hearing, what are we doing wrong? You know what? No interest in that, seemingly. So.
Yeah. Did you ever, being such a close neighbor and also being so connected, I'm curious about how this botanical garden situation happened. Has there ever been conversations about,
It happened because I told them it could happen.
Okay.
They planned for reasons I have no idea why. Now, you see, the problem is when you're talking to people who've lived here too long, we have landmarks. That's Witchcall's house. Where Speedway is. Mm-hmm. Next to Speedway, of course, is the post office. Next to Speedway is a small ranch house. Yeah, the man died not very long ago. Next to him, there's like a pretty narrow going back in the woods there. There's nothing there except a little piece. It looks like a little piece of woods. I don't know how big it is. But the part that's on the road, meets the road, is not very big. It's a pretty narrow lot. They had the sign up there that it was going to be the botanical garden. And I thought, why would you put a little... This used to belong to Campus Ministries, this big lot here. That was where Campus Ministry, there was a house there at one point. It was gone by the time we moved out here. It had gone. Campus Ministries left that property to Central State. And in those days, there was a Campus Ministries, and they wanted them to have a place for the people who were studying religion, which was perfectly fine. It was going to be just a plain old house. It is zoned residential, house. So I said, they told me they were going to build a building over here. A building for first they told me it was going to be a building. I'll tell you how I got off on the wrong foot with them. The white guy who was describing it to the zoning board when he was describing what was going to be there slipped up and said, he still works over there, slipped up and said, that way not everybody that came to the building would have to go on campus. Now, I know that where my mind goes the first place, when someone who's a Caucasian gets up and says they want to keep other people from having to go on campus, I don't think they're talking about other black people. Let me put it that way. Because this was supposed to be someplace that was kind of catering to farmers. So we got off on a bad foot. I am not going to help you protect your people from from black people. That ain't going to work. So that was the first thing. But I said, okay, now don't, Then they changed it up. Because originally they said something about maybe students would be in there too. Then they changed it up. There wouldn't be any students in there. It was going to be some kind of a place with research maybe or so forth and so on. Then they started talking about they might sell fertilizer. And I was like, no, that's in front of my house. You're not going to sell fertilizer. And so, needless to say, I was being difficult, as it were. I was nice about it. I just said, hell no. And so I told them after the first time, I said, put the botanical garden there. I said, that's a much better place. It would be much more open to the public, the people you're trying to keep from having to go around the black people. It would be much more just available. They said, no, we don't want to put it there. We don't want that. I said, okay, well, you better hope I go before you get the permit, because you're not going to get one while I'm breathing. That's all there is to it. And after about 2.5 years, lo and behold, a sign popped up. Future home of the botanical garden. And I said, that's nice. And so we watched them build the botanical garden. And they're very nice. And they invite us to everything. And it's certainly a good neighbor. Closes down probably about dark. Don't have any problems.
Did you continue listening to WCSU when you came back to this house?
Yeah. But you know what has happened, of course, and probably happened to all radio stations now that you have your phone. You listen to Pandora or whoever, So I have been surprised that they have not done more. No, I really haven't. I've been disappointed that they haven't done more talks. I've been disappointed they haven't done more talks.
Like more public affairs stuff.
More public affairs, more even interviewing students, that kind of stuff. I mean, you're on a college campus. I don't know that they do very much talking to the students as far as opinion, ideas, things like that. I would like to see, that you can't get on your phone, you know what I'm saying? So that would be much more valuable. Not only that, that's the kind of thing sometimes when you're in a place like this, which does have, we're majority, this township, of course, is majority agricultural. You have some folks, white folks, who probably don't even know anybody black to talk to. They could listen, you know what I'm saying? And some of them probably would. If it was a topic that they were interested in, whether they agreed with it or not, at least it would be one way. When I didn't tell you, when I came back from Carolina, I started having a monthly session. I had my first one here, but we outgrew here. I didn't think there were going to be that many people. I think it was 26 came the first time. Talk about race. I said, nobody talks about race here. And there's nowhere to go talk about it. If you're interested in it, who do you talk? You don't know any black people, or you don't know any black people who talk to you. So come, we'll just talk.
Who showed up?
Liberal white people. I A couple of black people, because I twisted their arm, they didn't want to come. And I did it for a year, 2 years. This table, my friend, a liberal white guy, Lawrence Hammer, owned a bookstore downtown called he had a restaurant, and it was called Tables of Contents. This was one of the tables from Tables of Contents. So Lawrence was fine to host we started hosting them there. And I basically stopped because the people who came didn't need to be there. You know, I was hoping, and I guess I was being naive, I was hoping particularly white people who didn't have any way to be safe to talk about race, you know, or black people who didn't have anywhere safe to talk about race would come, but it was all, so basically we were just going, you know, feeding each other, telling us how wonderful we all were and all the things that needed to be fixed, but nobody's here that doesn't know that. So I stopped it. Finally, I said, no point. He sold the restaurant. And he said, your family's growing. I said, yeah. He said, you want the table? I said, ooh, I think it'll fit. So I tried.
So, you know, our project, HBCU Radio Preservation Project, and we have a very clear mission that is rooted in the fact that Black radio and Black college radio has been instrumental as a voice for our communities, and it has a history that, you know, is too often forgotten or goes undocumented. And so, you know, our efforts in both, you know, trying to retrieve and preserve physical tapes and stuff, in addition to talking to people like you, talking to people at the stations, is just like, I don't know, for me personally, it feels like really important, heart-centered, root-centered work, right? I'm wondering if you can reflect a little bit about what is important about HBCU radio and HBCU media.
What could be important is if they would have people talking on the radio about the impact of actions, particularly by our current government, on Black people and what Black people, we went through. The people my age are frustrated, you might figure. We think that we have done all this stuff once already, and now we have to try to do it again. Black people have to understand something. For the past 40 years, I've been trying to tell Black people, we are not there. We are not there. America never dealt with race. They dealt with aspects of race, and what they did was drive most of what was wrong visibly underground, but it's always been there. Things just changed. Instead of having signs that said, we won't sell houses to Black people, they just made deals with mortgage companies not to sell Black people the house, or to sell that at a higher rate so they wouldn't buy there, which caused self-segregation, of course. I mean, if I can buy a house, Wilberforce is an example. You can buy some nice houses out here for probably $20,000, $30,000 less than in Xenia or in, Lord knows, in Beaver Creek. So that's why when we moved out here, Wilberforce was almost, I'm thinking when we moved here in 82, it was either in the 80s or 90% Black. Now I think it's 59, because the people died who used to be over here. As real estate loosened up, the white realtors started sending them to Beaver Creek because that was a bigger deal for them, because they're selling them a more expensive house. And so the people who who died from here, their kids didn't want to live here. They moved away anyway. So they're selling the house cheap, get it off your plate and not have to worry about going back to Wilberforce and do something or take care of a house in Wilberforce. So we got white people who bought a bargain house and they have no history here. Most of them have no interest here. They're not bad neighbors, don't get me wrong, but they're not black and they're not interested in black issues. Places like Central States, WSU could do a great deal if they would look at community issues here, there, everywhere. Don't keep it here. Where are these folks coming from over here? What is it like in Chicago? Oh, when I was teaching, I had a group of kids. I happened to have a group from Chicago. And I gave them a essay, a problem to solve, actually. And we had to stop because I would have said, call the police. None of them said it. They started telling me stories about what happens if you call the police in the city. That you're liable to be in more trouble when you haven't done anything than before you called the police. And I mean, the difference in talk about that. Talk about what's it like to grow up in Chicago. Talk about how is that different from here and what impact does that have on the way people view things, talk about things, or, participate in politics to get it to change so that there isn't war between the police and the people, that your first instinct to, if you had trouble, would be to call the police. It wouldn't be to not call the police. So the things I've learned from my urban students, talk about that. Talk about why. Hell, talk about Central State. Talk about why you can't get this, that, or the other. And I mean, come on. Let's make it relevant. I intellectualize it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Truthfully. But these kids will take it if it's interesting. I mean, they probably aren't going to want to talk about Boyle's theory of, but the bottom line is they would want to talk about that, the difference in growing up in suburban America and urban America. And some of it good. You have some things in urban you don't get in suburban. They get more independence because there's transportation. Public transportation in Xenia, you'd have had to hitchhike, so that if you weren't old enough to drive, and so I remember reading a book when I was probably about 12. The little girl went to visit the library, and she was probably about 12, and she got on the bus, and I thought, oh my goodness, you can do this by yourself, so, but fine, the topics are light skin, dark skin, which we all avoid. We all avoid it. And we all know about it. We almost saw my girlfriend. I had 5, we had a posse in Carolina. Everybody was a PhD. I had 6 women, all of us PhD. Some of us were married, some of us divorced, whatever. But we had a posse. That's what we called ourselves. Almost all of them were dark. And I never paid attention to dark and light when I was in Xenia, Ohio. We were so glad that people were black. We didn't really, talk about skin color very much. If you were real dark, some people might make but they swore. I mean, I had never heard so much about color because I hadn't been exposed to it. And I mean, they tell me all the time. They said, see, all these white people are nice to you because when we go out places, because you're light. And I said, they're nice to me because I smile. Y'all look like you're going to kill them all the time. And they said, no, that's not it. We have to have serious faces because they're going to try to mistreat us because we're dark. I hadn't been exposed to that. And so, I mean, it's not like we know everything about being black, even. I mean, so talk about stuff like that. It's not hard. I don't usually have any trouble entertaining people. So, I don't think it would be that difficult if they could do it. They could do it. course, I don't know what constraints are on them. I don't know what censors there, But we can know what shouldn't be. Not on a college campus.
What would you say your proudest accomplishment is in life?
I think probably, besides my family being successful, they all, what did Roseanne say, if those kids are all still alive, that one of them's not, we lost our son Christopher in 2018. He was an alcoholic, and he was a functional alcoholic, but he just didn't want to live close to us because he knew when he was gay, and so there were some challenges with that, and so forth. That's one who lived in New York for quite a while. He moved away from home, so forth. So yeah, but I think my proudest accomplishment actually is the relationship I have with my students. I didn't have problems with my students. I taught in inner city, I taught in country, I taught in suburban. I loved my kids and they loved me. So.
And what have you learned about yourself working in education and specifically with diversity in education?
That we need to change the way we teach. Get rid of standardized testing. Children are not standardized. Get rid of standardized. Get rid of teachers who are teaching because it's 9 months and don't like it. I subbed when I first came home because I said I'm still going to be writing about education, so I'll sub it to high school. See how these kids are. I haven't taught high school for a long time. They're easier than they were. That's all I can say. If you pay them the slightest bit of attention, within 2 weeks I was getting hugs at the front door. And on the flip side, many of the teachers found the kids very difficult. Like I said, the superintendent, Dr. Gabe Lofton, and we got off on a rocky foot, but we got to be, he calls us mom and pops. Let's put it that way. So they knew I was tight with the superintendent, so they complained to me. And I looked at them, and I'm like, you're not supposed to find problems. You're supposed to find connections. But they just want the kids to sit there and listen to them or look at the screen. They don't want to talk to them, it seems. And I'm like, and of course you know me. Well, no, you don't know me, but you know enough about me by now. Of course, what I would do is the kids wanted to talk because we threw the lesson plan the teacher left out the door because I taught long enough to know you don't really leave important plans with a sub. You don't know what kind of moron you might get. So I'd throw that out the window, and I'd sit there and start asking them questions about things or answering questions about things, and we'd have a blast. And even the French classes and stuff when I teach, and they say, "Could you be our teacher from now on?" No, I said, I would always defend the teacher. I would say, "I'm a guest speaker." I said, "Anybody can be fabulous for a day, so you can't compare me and your teacher. I don't have to see you, 186 days. She does." But they were so easy. You used to have to lure the kids into being your friend. These kids you say, "Oh, those are cute shoes," and they're your friend for life. I told, people say the kids spend too much time with screens, but I think they're not getting parental and teacher in, pull them out and say, "Talk to me, tell me something about you." Because I tried it. I do experiments. We were at a football game, and I had back surgery last fall. So we were at a football game. Wayne had gone to get the car because I'm limping with a cane. And I saw a group of about 7 or 8 girls, black and white, probably juniors and seniors. I sat down. When I was teaching high school, the teacher sat down at your table. You probably got up and left. We talked for 10 minutes. They just kept asking questions, and I kept asking them, and they were answering and laughing. I was like, this never happened when I was with these kids. They would if I knew them. But I sat down with a bunch of strange teenagers in 1980, and they'd have been like, what's wrong with this old chick? What's she? Yeah. They weren't like that at all. And so that reinforced how quickly they are you can get to them. So when these people are telling me the kids are acting up, the kids don't do it, I'm like, what are you doing? How can it be, I don't have magic fairy dust. How can it be that they're, just because I'm looking them in the eye and act like I care if they live, and yet you can't get to them? How? So it's astonishing to me. I just can't believe it. So we've got to change education, K-12 to PhD. It needs to be changed.
And I'm curious about what words of wisdom or advice you'd give to young educators, early career people that are interested but are likely maybe jaded by what's going on in education right now.
You can do what you want to do in your classroom as long as you make sure that children are on your side. You can do anything that you need to do. You don't have to worry about adversarial. The only time you're going to have any problems is when you aren't getting along already and they want to get rid of you. I mean, you know what I'm saying? The kids have to be on your side, and you have to be on their side. I broke rules. If one of my girls thought she was pregnant and her parents, she didn't want her parents to know, I made sure she could get a pregnancy test. I felt it'd be better for her to know when she talked to them about it. You weren't supposed to do that, but she wasn't going to tell on me. You know what I'm saying? She was going to say she had made other arrangements. You know what I'm saying? We're in this together. I didn't go behind the parents' backs and give them liquor or anything like that, but I made sure they understood. We got a relationship here, and I'm on your side. I'm not against your parents, but if you need, well, now you don't come here when people, you should feel honored. We were a team. We were a team. Of course, now, be honest, me and the parents were a team. I made sure the first time I talked to my parents, it was something good. I never called my parents later in the year, and I made sure I did it early because before we got something bad. So I talked to my parents early. I called them, told them somebody got a good grade, or I called them, told them that she participated well in class, or just 5 minutes. And then, if we did have trouble later on, the kid went home and told the parents, and the parents told him, shut up and do what Miss Newsom said. We're done. She knew I was legit with her kid, and because I was legit with everybody's kid. So, like I said, you have to be able to make your way so that those kids and you trust each other. It's the only way you can do it. If they don't trust you, they're not going to tell you things, number one. Mine told me too much frequently, but they were still my kids. So, I have a huge crew still, and I enjoy them.
Yeah, they're lucky to have you. Lucky to have you.
Yeah, I enjoy them. It's funny. Of course, I have what I call grand students around here. So a lot of times they'll run into you and they'll say, "Are you Ms. Newsom?" Yeah. I told Wayne, I said it was worth it because half of my students are old already and they got bad eyesight. And you look just like you did when you taught me. Yeah, you can't see. Okay. There are advantages.
Okay. That's most of what I have
Okay.
to ask for you. Thank you so
Super.
much. This was
You're so welcome.
a beautiful conversation. I really
Great.
do appreciate it. But
Now, where are you headquartered?
so our project is headquartered at WCSU.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, you live in Brooklyn.
I do.
All
Yes.
right. Wait, she's from Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually from North Carolina.
Where you're from? Where are you from now?
From Durham.
Oh God, you may be related. You look like my family members. Okay, let's see now. My mother's maiden name was Lyles. I had an aunt who lived out on Cook Road.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the country then. It was in the country. My mother graduated from what's the high school? I should remember the name. Hillside High School.
That's where
Hillside.
That's where my mother went.
She
My mother went to
graduated from Hillside High School. She sure did. Yeah, Durham. Oh yes, Lord.
Yeah,
I got lots of cousins and things down there.
We got Fords and Browns out there.
I'll have to look.
Yeah.
Like I said, because you could be.
You never know. You really
That's
never
true.
know.
You really never know.
I run into people all the time, and I'm like, you could be.
That's right.
really
That's
could
right.
be my cousin.
You could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for having me in your home.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.